Moana is great. It is a really entertaining, solid holdup of the Disney name, directed by the duo responsible for The Great Mouse Detective, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Hercules, Treasure Island in Space, and The Princess and the Frog. The film is utterly gorgeous and funny. Moana and Maui as characters work well off each other, and is probably the most consistently good musical Disney has done in years. Not the most original story in the world, especially the last third act, but all of the pieces are presented and executed so well that it still pulls off a highly enjoyable, charming experience and is still one of the best animated films in a year where there's actually been quite a few of them. And that concludes the spoiler-free portion of our review. Good night, everyone else. And while we're at it, thank you, Disney, for releasing a not terrible teaser this time that again wasn't taken from a scene in the movie and used primarily as the teaser in theaters to avoid being as spoiler-tastic as possible, because God knows not every company feels the same way about that. Right, Illumination? Because honestly, knowing as little as possible is more important here than others. Because as many reviewers have already stated, despite still being a very good movie, Moana's biggest flaw is evidently that it relies on formula. And not just the traditional Disney princess shtick with the plucky disobedient adolescent with an I Want song. No, technically this is a story about a...
The chosen one.
He is the one.
You're the special.
Chosen one!
So the likely turnout that Moana won't be most people's favorite film is not surprising, but honestly, I don't care. As we've stated, formula doesn't always have to suck, even in Chosen One stories, and Moana is one where the efforts that clearly went into the story's technicals for animation, pacing, music, atmosphere, humor, world building, and especially getting us to sympathize quickly with our protagonist is handled so well, I didn't even realize it was a Chosen One story until they flat out said the phrase halfway through it. Granted, saying the phrase is one of my giant cinematic no-nos, but at least the movie is self-aware of it, which allows them to poke fun at it and try to address the usual plot holes of the formula that other stories usually end up with. And even so, I say the narrative is pretty solid. Until the third act. The actual worst part of this movie, just to get all the negatives out of the way. And don't get me wrong, it's still technically executed well enough and has the right emotional payoff to still be a satisfying and beautiful ending. But it felt like all of the fun and effort put into the narrative and the dialogue had been completely spent in the first two acts, and the final climax basically runs on autopilot, giving it one of the most predictable, if visually stunning, endings. Heck, even then, the ending probably could have been saved if they had just taken 30 seconds to give one of the characters the proper motivation to do what they do. But no! And sadly, it does do the thing where it repeats one key phrase ad nauseum to really drive home its message. So get ready to hear who you really are 10,000 times. And also, several characters are told that particular external objects don't define who they are right before they are given said objects. Okay, that's it! That's all the bad things to say, and trust me, the good far outweighs the bad. It's just much easier to nitpick the small little bad things. Naturally, of course, it's gorgeous. All of the painstaking details put into the admittedly fictional and Disneyfied South Pacific culture, and how respectful they ultimately are isn't for me to judge, but I can at least say it wasn't for lack of trying, as these guys studied the various Pacific islands extensively. But especially for a movie that takes place almost entirely on the surface of the ocean, the water, of course, looks incredible. And as I've said, even though the story is familiar, the gradually unfolding of the narrative is so well paced, the dialogue and the character interactions are so well written that it is a ton of fun. Dwayne Johnson as Maui is a complete riot. The character is so boundlessly entertaining every single scene he's in, even while he plays a mix of the gruff, tough initial kid hater and the pompous, peacocking narcissist. But the real thing about his character that rules is his sentient tattoo that moves all over his body. This is one of the most genius devices in any movie ever. It is a mutually awesome, seamless way to utilize 2D animation in a 3D environment. It is used both as a comic relief and an exposition fairy, and is even a pivotal role in Maui's character as it basically acts like his conscience. Seriously, I love this thing so much. Somebody please make a side-scroller video game out of of Maui's tattoo. And I know there are certain things about Maui's design that have not gone down well on the internet lately, and while I stand by what I said in my Sausage Party review that everyone has the right to not like something or be offended by something, Lord knows I do that all the time. So whether the realization that maybe one of the reasons for Maui's massive size was so his sentient tattoo had a giant canvas on which to do all of the 2D animation justifies it, that's going to be completely up to you. And then, of course, there's Moana herself, proving that picking brand new non-Caucasian talent is indeed a thing that can happen when you actually try. And yes, it is the second time this year we have a highly idealistic role model character with a more flawed male co-star that at least is another platonic relationship, canonically. And even so, Moana is incredibly funny, energetic, definitely the most physically active human female lead Disney has had, and she does fail. It's also one of the first times we see a female employing some actual leadership, and thankfully one where nobody makes a big deal about a female being a leader, which is an interesting thing because this is also the first time, and about time, Disney employs the princess title as a negative slang. That was ballsy. However, I still feel like the real big struggle for Moana is going to be that it's going to be constantly compared to its mega blockbuster senpai, Frozen, which is natural in a world that is obsessed with comparing and ranking things. Yes, myself included. But it's also likely to be distorted because 3 years later, both the Frozen hype and the anti-hype train have refused to die. It's almost impossible for anyone these days to be impartial about that film. But to throw my hat into the ring for the record, because of its subversion, rare sibling love, and undertones of repression and depression, Frozen is more interesting narratively, but I still claim that there's a massive dip in quality after the first act, unlike Moana, where it only dips in the third act. And okay, I might be hyping up Moana because I know it has no chance to make the same amount of money Frozen did because it's not about pretty skinny white girls in full pretty dresses, and I'm still pissed at how much money Secret Life of Pets made. I do think that overall it does have better consistency and execution, but that's also because of its reliance on formula. And yes, Moana being a musical, nothing in it reaches the heights of Let It Go because there's no reasonable way you can beat a Disney song whose subtext is F the world. Still, on top of everything else, the music of Moana is fantastic, using a lot of traditional South Pacific language and sounds. Moana's song and Maui's song will likely make the rounds on YouTube for a bit. How far I'll go for just being beautiful and likely the best I Want song in Disney's current canon. And you're welcome for being the new theme for passive-aggressive showboating douchebags, but a really catchy and fun one. But you know what Moana absolutely does not have? Any musical deadweights like Summer or Fixer Upper. Hence my stance on Moana still being the new Disney Renaissance's most consistently good musical. And I don't need to mention that the co-writer for the music was the Hamilton guy, right? We all know that. So, I'd say that with the exception of the ending of Gravity Falls and the outright cancellation of Wander Over Yonder, Disney overall has been a bright spot in a really terrible year. And no, that doesn't necessarily mean animation, but I did have to watch a lot of crap this year. And to address what I said last time, I know some of you guys are freaked out over the possibility of Disney buying Netflix, but I'm sure Dragons is gonna be safe, and come on guys, remember the last time we all freaked out about a Disney merger, and then the next one? And oh boy, those things just turned out terribly, didn't they? And honestly, as ironic as it would be, I would much rather see a friendly collab between DreamWorks and Disney than the alternative. Oh, are we gonna talk about what these guys did to Sing? But in the meantime, go see Moana.
What can I say except you're welcome for the tides, the sun, the sky. Hey, it's okay, you're welcome. I'm just an ordinary demiguy.